Hello and welcome to Arnie's Short Stories. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Ghostly Sailor of Cowes. Holly Arnold had always been drawn to the sea. Growing up on the Isle of Wight, she spent her childhood exploring the rugged coastline, collecting shells, and listening to the old tales of sailors and shipwrecks that locals loved to share. Now, as a journalist for the island's small but dedicated newspaper, she found herself investigating a story that seemed plucked straight from those childhood legends, the Ghostly Sailor of Cowes. The rumours had been swirling for weeks, whispered in the pubs and murmured over cups of tea. Fishermen claimed to have seen a spectral figure walking along the shore at night, dressed in tattered, old-fashioned sailing gear. Some said they heard mournful cries carried on the wind, faint yet piercing. Others reported seeing a ghostly ship sailing into the harbour under a moonless sky, only to vanish before their eyes, leaving nothing but ripples in its wake. Holly was sceptical at first. Ghost stories were a dime a dozen on the Isle of Wight, where every creaky old building and shadowed cove seemed to have its own haunted tale. But these stories were different. They were too persistent, too consistent, and too unsettling to ignore. She decided to dig deeper, starting with the historical records at the Cowes Maritime Museum, a quaint building nestled near the harbour, its walls lined with nautical artifacts and faded photographs. The museum smelled of salt and old paper, and Holly spent hours poring over logbooks and yellowed newspaper clippings, her fingers tracing the brittle edges of pages. She searched for any mention of a sailor lost at sea under mysterious circumstances, her curiosity piqued by the whispers she'd heard. Finally, she found something. A faded article from 1875 reported the disappearance of a sailor named Edward Blackwood. He had set sail on a solo voyage around the island, a journey he had made countless times before, but this time he never returned. His boat was found wrecked on the jagged rocks near the western cliffs, its hull splintered and its sails torn. His body, however, was never recovered. Intrigued, Holly decided to visit the site where Blackwood's boat had been found. It was a desolate stretch of coastline, far from the bustling harbour of Cowes, with cliffs that loomed like dark sentinels and waters that churned restlessly below. She stood there, feeling the salt spray on her face and the wind tugging at her hair, and couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The air seemed heavier here, charged with an unnatural presence. She shivered, though the day was warm, and hurried back to her car, the sensation lingering like a shadow. That night, Holly had a vivid dream. She was on a ship, its deck slick with seawater, tossed by a violent storm that roared like a living thing. Lightning illuminated the sky in jagged bursts, revealing a man in a sailor's uniform standing at the helm. His face was obscured by shadow, but as he turned to her, she saw that his eyes were hollow sockets, staring into nothingness. His mouth moved, but no sound came out, and yet she felt his words echo in her mind, "Find me." She awoke with a start, her heart pounding, sweat beading on her forehead. It was just a dream, she told herself, but the image lingered, sharp and unsettling. The next day, Holly interviewed some of the locals who claimed to have seen the ghost. An old fisherman named Tom, his face withered by years of sun and salt, described the spectral figure in chilling detail, tall, with a gaunt, hollow-cheeked face and a tattered coat that flapped in the wind, walking along the beach as if searching for something lost. "He looks like he's looking for his soul," Tom said, his voice trembling. "I wouldn't go near that place at night, not for all the fish in the sea." Others echoed his story, their accounts eerily similar, and Holly began to feel a creeping sense of dread. Her investigation led her to the old lighthouse, a crumbling structure on the outskirts of Cowes that had been decommissioned decades ago. Rumour had it that Blackwood's ghost had been seen there, his shadowy form haunting the tower, his footsteps echoing in the empty chambers. As Holly climbed the spiral staircase, the air grew colder, and she heard faint whispers, like voices carried on the wind. At the top, she found a dusty logbook, its pages brittle with age. Flipping through it, she discovered an entry from the night Blackwood disappeared, storm raging. Lighthouse keeper reports seeing a ship in distress, no sign of survivors. The words sent a chill down her spine. If the lighthouse keeper had seen the ship, perhaps there was more to this story. She needed to find out who the keeper was and if there were any descendants still living on the island. After some research, Holly located an elderly woman named Margaret, the granddaughter of the lighthouse keeper. Margaret lived in a small cottage near the coast, its walls adorned with faded photographs and nautical memorabilia. When Holly explained her interests, Margaret's eyes widened. "My grandfather always said there was something strange about that night. He saw the ship go down, but he also saw something else, a figure walking away from the wreck, disappearing into the mist." Holly's mind raced. If Blackwood had survived the wreck, what happened to him? And why was his ghost now haunting the island? That evening, as Holly walked back to her car, she felt a chill run down her spine. The wind picked up, carrying with it the sound of distant footsteps, crunching on the gravel behind her. She turned, but there was no one there. The street was empty, the shadows lengthening as the sun dipped below the horizon. Suddenly, a voice whispered in her ear, low and rasping, "Find the truth." Holly spun around, her breath catching in her throat, but again she was alone. Her heart pounding, she hurried to her car and drove home, the eerie encounter replaying in her mind. Determined to uncover the truth, Holly delved deeper into the history of the island. She discovered that Blackwood had been involved in a bitter rivalry with another sailor, a man named William Hargrove. Hargrove had accused Blackwood of cheating in a sailing race, a scandal that had rocked the tight-knit community of cows. The two had nearly come to blows, their feud the talk of the town. Could Hargrove have had something to do with Blackwood's disappearance? Holly decided to investigate Hargrove's descendants, hoping to find some answers. She tracked down a man named James Hargrove, a retired sailor living in Cowes, his face lined with years of hard living. When she mentioned Blackwood's name, James's expression darkened. "My great-grandfather always said Blackwood got what he deserved," he spat, his voice thick with disdain. "He was a cheat and a liar. If he's haunting the island, it's because he can't rest in peace with his guilty conscience." But Holly sensed there was more to the story. She pressed James for details, and eventually he revealed a family secret. His great-grandfather had confessed on his deathbed to sabotaging Blackwood's boat, loosening the rigging and tampering with the hull, causing the wreck that led to his death. Shocked, Holly realized that Blackwood's ghost was seeking justice for his murder. But why was he appearing now, after all these years? As she pondered this, the ghostly appearances became more frequent and more menacing. Objects moved on their own, her notebook flipping open to pages she hadn't touched, her pens rolling off the desk. Holly began to see the spectral figure everywhere she went, his hollow eyes watching her from the shadows. One night she awoke to find the ghost standing at the foot of her bed, his gaunt face illuminated by the moonlight, his hollow eyes staring at her accusingly. She screamed, and he vanished, leaving only the echo of his whisper. Just as terrified, Holly knew she had to find a way to put Blackwood's spirit to rest. She decided to confront James Hargrove with the truth and persuade him to make amends for his family's wrongdoing. She arranged a meeting at the old lighthouse, hoping that the symbolic location would help appease the ghost. James was reluctant but agreed to come, his face pale and his hands trembling. As they stood in the tower, the air thick with tension, Holly revealed what she had learned. "Your great-grandfather murdered Edward Blackwood by sabotaging his boat. His ghost won't rest until the truth is acknowledged and justice is served." James's face paled, his eyes darting around the room. I didn't know," he stammered. "I thought it was just an accident." Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and a gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the flashlight Holly had brought. The ghostly figure of Edward Blackwood materialized before them, his eyes burning with anger, his tattered coat fluttering in the unnatural wind. James felt his knees trembling, his voice shaking as he cried, "I'm sorry. On behalf of my family, I apologize for what was done to you. Please, find peace." The ghost's expression softened, and he nodded slowly, his form beginning to fade. Then, with a final gust of wind, he vanished, leaving the room silent and warm once more. Holly and James stood there, shaken but relieved. The haunting had ended, and Blackwood's spirit could finally rest. In the days that followed, the strange occurrences ceased, and the island returned to its peaceful state. Holly wrote her article, not about a ghost story, but about the power of truth and reconciliation, the weight of history, and the importance of facing the past. As she looked out over the sea, the waves glinting in the sunlight, she felt a sense of closure. The ghostly sailor of cows had found his peace, and so had she. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.